August 13th, 2018, Shanannwatts did what many of us have done countless times for the very last time. She returned home from work, walked up her driveway, turned the doorknob, and stepped into what should have been the comfort of her own home. What happened upon crossing that threshold of her front door will forever remain a mystery, it seems. Chris Watts originally confessed on August 15th, 2018, and was taken into custody, never again to step foot outside the confined walls of a prison with the exception of a courtroom in the event of an appeal. His first confession is rather troubling given that it was believed hook, line, and sinker without any evidence to support it. Some would argue that he told them where the bodies were, yet anyone with 20/20 vision and common sense could look at the drone photo and deduce where everyone was put. Keeping in mind probably the biggest piece of timeline, the drone was already in play prior to his confession. I've mentioned in the Defending Kessinger series about the terms of immunity and the different types. As we see in the Karla Homolka case, once full immunity is granted, it cannot be overturned, no matter what evidence is presented after the fact. In order to get said immunity, one must be present at the scene of a crime when it's taking place, or being an active participant at any level. These terms are agreed upon prior to any information being provided. It's my opinion that ultimately, this is why the interview with Kessinger, when her father is present, has not only raised so many questions, it's the only way it makes sense. She wasn't supposed to be there. Late in the original confession with law enforcement, Chris Watts can be heard mumbling to his father she wasn't supposed to be there. As many of us have done over the years, we continue to ask who he was talking about. When the question remains on its own, there are possibilities. However, when you couple it with the other quote, "I don't want to protect her," suddenly it takes a dramatic shift. Let's look at each one of them. The immediate thought is, of course, Shanann. The only way I can see, quote unquote, she wasn't supposed to be there, referencing Shanann, is if, in fact, Shanann arrived home quicker than he thought she should have returned. Keep in mind, Shanann had texted him telling him about the delay, Chris fell asleep on the couch, and whether or not he was discombobulated a little bit and thought he had more time. This would, in my opinion, explain one way that Shanann and Kessinger ultimately would have collided at the Watts home. One theory would have it that Kessinger didn't believe Watts was going to end things with Shanann upon her return, so she did what she had done before. She drove over to the Watts home, parked in the back, and in the midst of Chris trying to get Kessinger to leave before Shanann got home, he ran out of time. Then all hell broke loose. In this case, the one he wouldn't want to protect would have to be Kessinger. As far as Chris knew, law enforcement did not think Kessinger was present in the Watts home that day. This would still give rise to the concept of Kessinger and Shanann fighting it out downstairs and waking the kids. Some have speculated that he meant Bella. Bella walking into the room and seeing Shanann she wasn't supposed to be there. Again, on its own, maybe the little one woke up and did what she always did, which was to go check in with her mom, and especially knowing that mommy had been out of town and she was excited to see her. Then again, why wouldn't he want to protect Bella? Do you see how these two comments together demand us to pause about what we think actually happened? The same could be said about Cece. Either one of the girls could have stirred about that morning. However, it doesn't make any sense that Chris would express that he did not want to protect her. And this brings us to the Nickies of the case. Some have speculated that Chris is referring to Atkinson showing up unannounced that morning and putting a stop to the whole plan. I can see this as a viable possibility. However, you have to take the next step and admit that Atkinson had made her way into the home without permission when she couldn't get a response from Shanann. So let's pause for just a moment and let me share with you my 100% opinion on this. My ride or die, my best friend and I have had this conversation about this case numerous times. I've shown her the footage and observed her reactions. Now keep in mind, she's not the true crime buff like I am. She doesn't really watch those types of shows or anything like that. I kid you not, she was practically screaming at the TV, yelling like, kick the door down, or why are they not calling out to her, or why are they not running up the stairs? Like, what in the actual is going on? My friend's reactions are very much what many of us have said. A door can be replaced. Forgiveness can be given later. A true friend would have made a way to get inside and make sure that her friend is okay. So before you come at me in the comments, I will say that I do believe Nicole Atkinson cherished her friendship with Shanann. You can question many other things, but I do believe Shanann brought a spunk and happiness to Atkinson's world, and while they may have been new friends or even reluctant friends in the beginning, it doesn't mean that they did not have a genuine friendship. Furthermore, Atkinson's fears are understandable had she been inside and already knew that her purse and phone were there. No Shanann, and the front door was locked. Coupled with a missed doctor's appointment and no communication with friends, that would 100% explain why Atkinson panicked and insisted on calling law enforcement. We add in the quote, "I don't want to protect her." It could very well apply to Atkinson for being in the home without permission. He's selfishly trying to deflect the blame and focus from what he did to something petty when it comes to her friend. Atkinson wasn't that alarmed or fearful for her friend without having had some indication that she was in danger. Let's even tap into her allowing her daughter to roam around inside while law enforcement was there. Some have questioned, how in the world do you let your little one run around a home when she may stumble upon a deceased person? Their response could easily have been, she already knew no one was in the home because she had already been inside. This theory could even further explain why Atkinson questioned law enforcement if she was going to get in trouble or be arrested. Why else would she even be concerned about this? It's seen on the doorbell footage that Shanann is alive and walking away from Atkinson's car. So even though she saw her that night prior, she wasn't the last one to see her. Entering the home without the homeowner's permission is the only way this fear really makes sense. I will take it a step further on my channel and say that I don't blame her if this is what actually happened. That's what any friend would have done. Hell, my girl would have kicked that door off the hinge without hesitation. We have safety measures in place between us that we know when something isn't right and when to act. I'll share with you a personal example that occurred between us on just a health-related issue. I had donated plasma one day and the line had infiltrated. It made me horribly sick, and as a single mother with my 2 children at home, I was really scared that if something happened to me, then my kids wouldn't understand the need to call an ambulance. I spoke with my best friend while sitting in the parking lot of the facility. I told her I was lightheaded and needed her to talk with me as I drove home. Keep in mind, she lives an hour away from me. She talked to me the whole way home as I drove. Yet, talking made me nauseous. So the drive home consisted of her. You there? Me. Yes. Her. Hang in there. You're almost home. Me. Okay. Her. Where are you now? Me. I'm at the red light next to Hooters. You're almost there. Me. Yep. Her. You okay? Me. I feel sick. Her. If you need to pull over, you pull over. Me. I'm okay. I'm almost home. Her. You okay? Me. These damn red lights are taking freaking forever. Both of us laugh. Me. Okay, I'm turning into my place. Her. I'll stay on the phone until you get inside. Me. Okay. I'm inside. Kids know to check in on me. Thanks for talking to me on the way home. I love you. Her. Love you too. I'll call and check on you in a little bit. Me. Okay. The phone call ends. Fast forward an hour. She's called to check on me. I pass out asleep and slept through 6 phone calls. Next thing I know, my dog is barking up a storm. The kids run to the door and say, "It's Aunt Kimmy, Mom." She walks in with 2 body armors and some food for the kids. She sat with me until the fluid started kicking in and I was more alert. No one had to invite her to come to me. She had been through a similar episode herself and knew how sick it made her. So when she didn't get a response from me, she drove up here and made sure I was okay. That's what friends do. Let's look at this through the lens of Atkinson. She just spent a weekend with Shanann. Several of her friends have said that weekend she was stressed and didn't act like herself. She stayed in her room at the hotel because she didn't feel well and was visibly upset. I won't speak for these ladies, but I know the majority of ladies will talk. Yeah, sure, Shanann had to step into that role of saleswoman, and she was there for a reason. She was there for business. But, as many of us do, sometimes you get up and you get dressed, you show up, you go to work, and then you come home and you're just beat. And essentially, that's how this weekend comes across to me after reading and listening to all of their interviews. I'm curious as to how these conversations went that weekend, especially with Atkinson at the airport and on the way home. No doubt the line, "If you need me, you call me," came up at some point. It's what friends do. Maybe Atkinson told Shanann, "I'll call you in the morning, and if you need me to take you to your appointment, just let me know." Regardless, she was a friend who knew something wasn't right with her friend. She woke up that morning and something felt off. She checked in with her friend. No Facebook post about the girls or Thrive. Especially after a weekend retreat, that's the prime time to post and promote. She saw nothing. She texted her, got nothing. She went on about her morning, then texted again, nothing. Drove by the house, got no response. Left to check the doctor's office while running another errand. She didn't show up. And then Atkinson went back to the home of her friend and set in motion what we see on the body cam footage. She wasn't this overly dramatic friend like some suggest, at least not in my opinion. It's so sad to read or hear about the amount of people whose quote-unquote friends wouldn't act the same way. I'd hate to be friends with some of your friends. I'm beyond thankful that my bestie is one that will show up without hesitation. She would ask questions and she would have torn into Watts immediately upon his return. It's my personal opinion that at this time, Atkinson was already sick over what may have happened to her friend, that she couldn't wrap her head around everything else that was happening that morning. We may never know the truth about if Atkinson entered the home before law enforcement is seen at the home, but it would certainly explain a lot about their reactions. It is possible that if this occurred, then she wasn't supposed to be there, and "I don't want to protect her" could apply to these events. More so, in my opinion, would be the other Nikki, the Kessinger.
It validates things that we know. I'm not going to come out and tell you that if you tell me something today, we'll validate it with your text messages, whether it's the ones we have now or the ones you're going to give us. Certainly.
If you want to go get him.
I want you to read this.
Of all the theories we've heard and discussed regarding Kessinger, the one that would explain the most would be the following. Watts and Kessinger end their 111-minute phone call. Kessinger, out of her normal behavior, doesn't call Chris that morning. Keep in mind, we've had a track record of her calling him literally just about every morning during that summer, and then goes ghost on him the morning of the murders. Instead, she chooses to drive by the house. Element of surprise, indicated by the phone ping that morning. Surely he's gone by now, and she would see that Shanann and the girls are awake and moving about inside. Maybe this is the perfect time in her mind to confront Shanann and tell her about the affair. Only to her surprise, there isn't anyone awake, home, and no movement inside. She panics and calls Jim. It's a short call, so maybe no answer, or maybe it just went to voicemail. She immediately turns her phone off and drives out to Survey. This results in no clock-in time that morning, yet because she's in charge of safety, she could easily explain why she opted to drive out to the site to inspect the work to make sure that it was complete. I mean, keep in mind, the alert, I believe, came out like that Friday, and they waited the entire weekend to get out there for first thing Monday morning to repair it. So if in fact it had actually been a really bad leak or really bad issue, that thing had Friday night, Saturday night, Sunday night to get worse. Did Chris tip her off in that 111-minute phone call to something sinister? Meanwhile, Chris is digging the hole for Shanann, jamming out to the song Battery by Metallica because the silence out there would have been deafening, especially with the flood of thoughts and reliving images in your mind. Kessinger drives up without Chris noticing, maybe observes from afar. If he was indeed playing Metallica out there, the sound would have traveled. I've always questioned why so randomly Kessinger would ask him about lyrics to a song like that. It's possible she may have heard it but couldn't make it out. So she asked him, and then the lyrics speak for themselves. I wish we had Anadarko footage from the parking lot to show when she actually arrived at work that day, if at all. It's possible she went back home and tried to unsee what she may or may not have seen that morning. Then once the news broke about them missing, she chatted with Chris a little during the day and then called her father. If not immediately, she called once they had the emails from Anadarko. Having been at the scene of the crime that morning, some form of immunity would have allowed her to speak freely in that interview without fear of being prosecuted. Full immunity, especially. Witness protection would have only been granted if there were active threats to her directly related to the case, meaning it would have had to come from someone directly involved in the case. This does not include the media. Let me just say that again. It does not include the media. It does not include YouTube. It does not include the newspapers, reporters, anyone out here with a random opinion. It does not include those people. The only people that witness protection would be funded and approved to defend her and protect her from would be individuals that are directly related to the Watts case. Period. There's no room for emotion with that. It's the only explanation I've been able to come up with that does not directly involve her in the crimes. This Defending Kessinger series has been an effort to highlight the possibilities that she wasn't as actively involved. In the Defending Kessinger series, I have shared with you some insight I gained from local law enforcement. The clarity on what is required for some form of immunity, especially full immunity, has solidified, in my opinion, the direct involvement, or at the very least, presence of Kessinger that August 13th morning in 2018. Whether you believe Kessinger showed up that night prior to Shanann walking through the front door, or you believe that Kessinger showed up after Watts left, both would give rise to the fact that Kessinger would have been present at the scenes of a crime, possibly witnessed the crimes directly, or what many suspect, that she was directly involved on some level. Before you argue that if she committed any of these murders, then she wouldn't have been given immunity, keep in mind the case of Karla Homolka. This woman was granted full immunity to give up her husband, and later on it was discovered the murder and torture of her own sister at her own hands, laughing and engaging in the murders, was recorded on video with audio, yet she still walks free today. And until the recent documentaries aired, she'd been teaching at an elementary school in Canada. Think about that. Because they cannot reverse the immunity. While the arms of justice are long, some remain just outside its grasp. But as we are seeing in the Markel case, that I'll be covering more on this channel, that long arm of justice just may come back swinging from another direction. Personally, I don't believe anyone else will ever be charged in the Watts case. Kessinger will never face charges with regards to Shanann, Bella, Cece, or Nico. The only death she will come to terms with is the death of who she was prior to meeting Chris Watts. She has managed to slip into the abyss of the American people and continues to live life free from the captivity of a prison. Some allude to the fact that she may be a prisoner in her own mind. However, I don't know how much of that I believe. The police interview sessions speak volumes about her mindset during that time. They speak loudly, in my opinion, as to who she was as a person. The only prayer we have is that she's grown from that moment in her life and hopefully into a better version of herself. The only way she will ever serve time will be in the horrendous event that another life is lost due to her involvement, and justice swings back swift and hard to compensate for all the lives lost because of her. I'm not going to conclude this series officially. In the event anything further comes to light that would defend Kessinger, I'll keep the series open-ended. My final thoughts as of 2023. Kessinger is either guilty of showing up unannounced and witnessing the crimes being carried out, responsible for Shanann's death alone, helping dispose of all of them, or most disturbingly, committing the crimes against Bella and Cece. Any of these would give rise to she wasn't supposed to be there, meaning Kessinger wasn't supposed to be at Survey or Saratoga that morning, and Chris stating, "I don't want to protect her," because he's more worried about the look of protecting the mistress than the actual crime itself. You cannot ask the world to believe that this man is such a horrendous monster and not reveal just how monstrous he truly was. This brings me to the next Watts topic that I will cover, and that is baby Nico. Stay tuned, and thank you for being here.